My Gavanen, Melunin, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadurthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer as we continue on with a faction overview, and this time with the clans of Enedwaith, as predicted by many of you at the end of the last episode. It is indeed Enedwaith. So, with the various bits and pieces, anything I should say at the beginning of every one? I always start these on the second turn, so do note that all of the regions around you are the turn 1 auto expansions and do not necessarily reflect what you will actually start with. So I do suggest you watch each overview to learn what that particular faction starts as when you play as them. Other than that, I think we can dive straight in. So, the size of your domain and your initial army is Enedwaith. Well, your domain is average in size. When you've got nations like Mordor, Gondor, with vast empires at the game start, but then you've also got nations like Lothlorien and Imladris with 1 to 3 provinces. Enedwaith sit firmly average. You've got Londangren and Karas here in the south, your large capital region of Alkfud, or Lugia, and Baradvin to the north there, up against the river Gwathlo. And then across the river, across the said river, you can find a small detached region that you own of Erunvorn or Dulvorn, the capital of that province. And that's it. So relatively small, really, but not tiny. But in terms of your actual army, that is very small, unfortunately. You've got a general and a couple of units of Javelin men over there. Alkford has a couple of archer units. Same in Londangren and the same in Karas, with Dulvorn having a woodsman of Erunvorn. Or Erunvorn woodsman, the other way around. So, a very small army with an average starting domain. So, it's going to be a bit tricky at the beginning depending on what you do. So, your leader, your capital, and your unique bodyguards and your diplomat. Well, your leader is in your capital of Alkford, of course. And there he is, Moot Lord Tremach. And that is your unique faction leader strategy model. So, whoever your faction leader is, that's what they'll look like on the campaign map. That is what your captain looks like. A river swordman, and if we come up to Baradvin, this is a standard Enedwaith general. So a very wildmanish theme to your army. Your faction lord then, Moot Lord Tremach, he has Guardians of Enedwaith as his bodyguard, and they are one of your best, if not the best unit that Enedwaith can get. You won't get them for a very long time, so do use him very wisely, because they're bloody useful. You'll note that you don't have a family tree. You are a Teutonic faction, which means that whilst your generals do have their own little families, there's no guarantee that the son of the leader will become the next leader. And indeed, your greatest general will be made your faction leader, even if someone else is called your heir. So taking a look at Fosca here, this is the standard bodyguard of Enedwaith, the Elder Guildsman. So Fosca, obviously not your heir. I believe your heir is in Londangren. No, that's Erdrek. There he is. Chieftain Harek. He is your faction heir. He doesn't have a unique CSM, he's just like everyone else. But he does have a unique unit of Moot Keepers. The other good unit for Enedwaith. And when we get onto the stats on the other half, you'll see that good is a very relative term. For even though the Moot Keepers are one of Enedwaith's finest, they are one of the world's worst. So it can be difficult as Enedwaith, as we shall see. But Chieftain Harek is currently my faction heir. But let's say, for example, that Erdrek of Londangren goes on many crusades and becomes the finest general in Enedwaith. Then the chances are he would be made the faction leader upon the death of Tremach. And then Harek will remain as the heir. And that is very much how it works. Now, the only downside with Teutonic family trees is that the game needs at least one turn between the death of a member, one of the two people that actually hold office. It needs one turn between the death of someone who holds office and then the death of the other person who holds office. So what I mean by that is if your faction lord and your faction heir die in the same battle, your faction will be defeated, is what we have seen. And certainly from our testing, what we can show. Whereas if your faction lord dies, but the heir doesn't, then someone will become the lord and the heir will remain the heir, or someone will then become the heir and the game will continue on fine. But if they die in the same turn, the game doesn't just take a general from the pool of generals you've got, it just kills your faction off, which is very annoying. So do note that. Also, your diplomat, of course, comes from Alkford, from the unique building, the Great Clan Hall, which is just there. Great Clan Hall. Right, so Rebel expansion then. Well, as you can see, a lot of choices available. You can head south to Balorn, which is a fairly wealthy province, or you can go for Gund, which is also a fairly wealthy province. Balorn wealthy because of its mines. I don't know why I just said Gund is wealthy. It's not. It's very average. But it does have mines, which is at least nice. Or the bigger and larger area, and the most likely place you will go, of course, is straight to Londair because it's a large, it's a city, which is very useful. That's where the other crossing point of the Gwathlo is, and you can head up to Bregost and then up to Carasnernaled and on to Argond if you wish. And Matraith and Cor Willishar are normally also up for the taking because the Breland take a while to come down and get them. Speaking of the river, the other crossing is all the way up at Tharbad, so it's holding Londair gives you a real lifeline to getting around in Eriador. So your neighbours in diplomacy. Enedwaith are unique in that they're one of the few nations in the game that have no allies and no enemies. The others, of course, being the Ardenaim. And there is one other as well, but I can't remember who it is. I think there's one other. I may be lying. No, I'm probably lying. No, there is no one else. It is just yourself. The Ardenaim as well only have no enemies or allies if you play as them. When you play as anyone else, they are automatically allied to Mordor and Harad, and they are at war with the Gondor and Dol Amroth. So you have no enemies immediately around you. You can choose to attack anyone. Linden, Bree, Dunland, Isengard, and Gondor. Those are your nearest neighbours, and indeed you border most of them. You're but a turn away from Bree, you already border Linden, you already border Dunland, who will be your chief adversary normally. You already border Isengard, and you're but a turn, a province away from Gondor. So do watch out. Now the Dunlendings, it's about 50-50 whether or not they'll attack you. They don't hate you, but neither do they love you, so that's always a chance. But do note that if you go to war with Dunland, almost invariably Isengard joins in. And they'll attack you. And Isengard are very good, and you're not. So, in terms of troop quality, so do watch out for that. So, economy and buildings then. Well, unfortunately, you're a Wildman faction. You've not mastered city building in any great way, and you can't build higher than a large town. Which means you can only get the first tier of walls and the second tier of walls. And in castles, you can't go beyond a castle, which is the second tier. Look, those are bugged out. That's all right. You can't go beyond the second tier. So in Badadvin at the minute, it's a keep, which means that once I get it to the right amount of population, it will upgrade. But that's as far as it can go. So only large towns and only castles. You can't get the two largest tiers of cities, and you can't get the largest tier of castles. So you are restricted in terms of how much money you're going to make, because you just can't build as many good money buildings. And you just can't build as many buildings full stop, really. So you're not going to be winning any awards in terms of money making. But Medieval 2 is a game where it's very easy to make money. And so you won't struggle either, because it's just almost impossible to do that. In terms of the blacksmith line, you only get 3 tiers of your blacksmith. If we go to smiths, there he is, smiths, sorry. Leather tanner, leather worker, blacksmith. Very simple and straightforward. You only get 3 tiers. Unique buildings then for Enedwaith as we go through. Well, again, of course, the Armory is where you will get all of your garrison troops. If you want to build a garrison, if you want a town to have a garrison, you must build the Armory. Armory reduces your income by 100 gold in the town you build it in to reflect the upkeep of the units. I'll cover in scripts in a moment another building you get, but in terms of guilds, you get an Archers Guild, as Enedwaith are quite a ranged nation. So there's the Hunters Guild, the Master Hunters Guild, and the Elder Hunters Guild, but it is, of course, just the Archers Guild. And it gives you bonuses for your archers the world over, which is very, very useful. You also get the Fighter's Pit that everybody gets, and yours is called a Warrior's Hut, and then a Warrior's Hall. And it gives you just an experience bonus to troops trained there, which is nice. Your town health buildings are the Herbalist and the Apothecary. And there they are, giving you little boosts. But they do require, unfortunately, the Herbalist requires a Moot Hall. And the Apothecary requires an Arnorian Hall, which you can't get. You can only get the Moot Hall, because you can't build the town large enough to get the Apothecary. So that is lost to you, unfortunately. The Halls of Alkford is a unique building in your capital where the Moot Keepers come from, and it gives you various other bonuses. And as we come to it in the script, once you unite Enedwaith, it then also gives you extra bonuses on top of that. It should also be noted that the Wildmen have a rather unique style of troop training. And that is that rather than train a barracks, an archery range, and a stables, you only have one building and it has 3 tiers. So the first tier building will give you all of your kind of military type units, although your militia units actually come from the town hall. So there's your militia units there. And then once you build your muster ground, you get your mainstream units. Then when you upgrade it to its second tier, it's not an upgrade, it's an addition. So once you then build the ancillary training grounds, you get then most of your archers and cavalry. And then there is a third and final upgrade for it, which is just a vast upgrade and gives you your elites. So all of your units come from one building line. Now it is made quite expensive to reflect that. Not massively so, but it's a little more expensive than other nations. To reflect the fact that all of your units come from the same place. So it's a lot easier to train units as Enedwaith than it is with other nations, which is a nice little boost for them. But of course, you've got a lot of building restrictions, so it's a bit of a playoff. Right, so scripts that I keep talking on. There are two that deal with Enedwaith especially. Number one is called the Clan Moot. Now this is a series of messages that pop up as you play through the campaign, and they might instruct you to go somewhere and do something, or prepare to defend somewhere, or just little things like that, like ally with this nation. And they're a scripted line, so they're separate to the missions that the hard-coded missions that the game can give you, like capture Londere or besiege this port or things like that. And they are dedicated missions, so you do have a read of what they say and do follow suit along what they say, and it's just a nice little path that will lead to certain things. So for example, one of them asks you to take Londere and Suduri, and then after a certain amount of turns an army might spawn to retake it, made up of like the locals and things like that. And it's just a fun little script that gives Enedwaith a little bit of extra flavour. The other quasi-script for Enedwaith is the Unite the Clans script. And that is quite simply that by uniting all of Enedwaith, the requirements for uniting are in Moot Lord Tremak's. He's got an ancillary, I believe. No. That's the Dunlendings. For you, it's in the Hall of Outford. So, to unite the clans, it explains it in this paragraph at the bottom. You must capture all of the regions listed. Now, its list goes on region, so you have to right-click on the mouse on the map and read where they are. Like Malfin is there, Saroline is there, Lugia, Bay of Eisen, for example, Kyril, and they're all listed there. If you unite all of those regions, you then get to recruit, number one, the unit that Moot Lord Tremak has, the Guardians of Enedwaith, which are a very, very good unit. And it also gives you a new building that you can build in various places that trains this unit. But then beyond that, uniting all of the clans allows you to train some of Dunland's units, because you've united all of Eriador under your banner, and the Dunlendings are just a clan of Enedwaith. I said Eriador, I meant Enedwaith. Enedwaith is a geographical land and not actually a nation. That's why it's called the Clans of Enedwaith. It's not a nation, it's just a gathering of clans that live in this location. And Dunland is one such clan. They're just the most prominent clan, and of course the most famous. But by uniting them, you also then get access to their troops. And to unite them, as I say, is listed in the Great Hall's construction tab at the bottom. So do have a read, and it will tell you what you need to do. So that's the main scripts for Enedwaith. We then come on to major map changes in the area since version 1.2. Well, of course, Heret is a new addition, as is this large forest on the southern side here, which many people may not have realised. And it's just a nice little region in the middle there. On the northern side of the river, I don't think there are really any changes. Caras Nernaled is no longer in that little corner. It's now in the middle of the region. Dolvorn is now a much larger region, and the small village that was here has been taken away. So that's something. Of course, Royal Tharbad and Tharbad are now twisted around so that they are still north and south of the river, but more kind of east and west. And they, of course, have the Osgiliath battle maps. There's a little change there. But outside of that, I don't think there's much different to the geography of Enedwaith. So not too much different at all. So then we come on to tips and difficulty before we deal with the units that Enedwaith can train. Enedwaith are an easy nation or a really difficult nation, depending on who you attack. If you ally with Isengard, and then by extension Dunland, you'll cut access to a certain number of troops that you could train, but you'll have a really easy time of it. You can capture all of these rebel provinces, and then you can slowly build up troops and just sweep into Gondor when they least expect you. Or sweep into Bree when they least expect you, or indeed into Lindon. However, if you decide to play it properly alone and go absolutely hell for leather and attack everyone, then it can be a really difficult campaign, but it can be damned fun. The elves won't really bother with you because the elves are just basically out of the game all the time. Bree, you are actually quite evenly matched with Bree until the barracks event, when Bree unfortunately do start to pull away from you because of the Northern Dunedain influence. Dunland and you are evenly matched right through to the end. Arguably their elites might be better mainline troops, but your elites are much better at doing sneaky tricks and tactics. Of course, Isengard and Gondor hugely outclass you from day one. Your militia units are worse than their militia units, your middle tier are worse, your elites are worse, your archers are worse. Only in the Javelin units do you actually have any hope of beating Isengard and Gondor. So it can be challenging, but it's up to you how challenging you make it. So there isn't really any tips, to be honest. The best tip, of course, is just to rush for all the rebel provinces and try and secure them as early as possible. Because then you'll have a larger domain, and everything's easier when you have a larger domain. Now, do just note that, yes, the image for the Grove of Stories in Alkford is unfortunately incorrect. But you'll note that in Barad Vin, for some reason, it isn't. But then that one there is also then bugged out. I'm not really sure why, but it's easily fixed for the future versions. So, but I can't tell you for why at the moment those don't work. I probably deleted them is the reason, to be honest, by mistake. But that's just a minor thing. Don't worry too much about that. So that's it. I'll see you on the battle map side. Oh no, hold on, I was going to say something else. Yes, and scripts, I forgot to mention that Enedwaith, because they start completely neutral with everyone, you actually have the ability to decide what you want to do with the ring. You're the only faction that does. Everyone else is either good or evil. No matter how you play the campaign, you are good or evil. However, Enedwaith get to choose. So if you ally with Isengard, you are then deemed to be evil, and you get the option to give the ring to Sauron. If you, however, ally with Gondor or Lindon, you are then deemed to be good, and you get the option to destroy the ring. Yeah, which is a nice little twist. So if you don't side with any of them, then the ring doesn't actually do anything for you. So you need to be... If you go it alone, you can't do anything with the ring. But then do remember that Mordor can be destroyed by just taking all of their regions now, and they no longer need to... The ring no longer has to be destroyed to destroy Mordor. So it's not the end of the world if you have played it alone, but you actually want to kill Mordor. It's just unfortunate, obviously, because dropping the ring into Mount Doom is a very easy way to avoid fighting the treadmill that is Mordor, by just sending in an army that they can't attack, leaving it next to the mountain, and destroying the ring. And then you defeat them very easily and quickly. And you can only do that if you side with Gondor or Lindon. And by that I mean ally with Gondor or Lindon. But anyway, that is it. I will see you on the battle map. Welcome, then, to the Enedwaith army overview. Now, the first thing to appreciate when you look at the Enedwaith roster is, number one, pretty damn light on cavalry and very light on late game cavalry, because there are none. But also, if you have a quick scan of the unit cards, you'll note that a very large number of the units can hide anywhere, which is a big advantage. And indeed, almost your entire first tier can hide anywhere, with the only exception being the cavalry, who of course can't hide horses anywhere. But everything else can. So all of your militia get the boost that they can at least hide anywhere. You'll also note that Enedwaith has quite a large number of ranged units, although do discount the Druidine. But they have quite a large number of ranged units. That's an interesting way of mixing two words. Ranged units. But do note that most of them are Javelry. Javelry? I'm really getting all over myself. They're Javelry. Javelin cavalry. So the Raiders there, the Riders there, the Angren Raiders, and the Guardians of Enedwaith are all Javelin forces. Okay, so let's crack on then. So the very first unit that you get as Enedwaith are the Klansmen. Little more than, well, just peasants with weapons, really. They're not very good at all. Total defense of 3, attack of 4, charge bonus of 3. They can hide anywhere, though, and they can at least get good stamina. But poor morale response. They are the very definition of wild men. Angry, aggressive, but really quite garbage. And a dedicated military force will utterly ruin them. But they can hide anywhere, so at least they can lay ambushes. Now, they are, of course, supported by a mainstream unit for Enedwaith. Not a mainstream, they're both mainstream, but a mainstay, sorry. And they are the Greyflood Axemen. The Axemen make up for in aggression and savagery what they lack in defense. Their total defense is 5, but that is only defense skill. Now what that means is that basically even snagger archers will utterly ruin them. You've really got to be careful when you're using these that they don't get shot, because they can't take arrow fire for love nor money. But they can hide anywhere, and they're effective against armor, and they have a 7 attack. So if you can lay the ambush, they can do some real damage. They can really hit the enemy where it hurts, but you've just got to do quite a bit of micro to make sure that they do that. You'll also note that their morale is actually average, with an average morale response, which is quite nice. Do also note the slight quirk in the system of Medieval 2, if you're not aware. Going from 0 armor to 1 armor by building the first tier of Blacksmith and upgrading your armor. That is actually an upgrade that is equivalent to 4 points of armor. I don't know why, and I'm pretty sure it's a typo in the hard-coded nature of the game that was never fixed. But for some reason, going from 0 to 1 is the same as actually like going from 0 to 4. And then obviously the jump between 1 and 2 is only 1 point, but you're effectively already kind of at 4 points. And I think it's just to reflect that going from no armor to at least some armor is actually a bigger change than just going from, say, normal leather to cured leather or whatever the stages of leather are. And I think it's either that or it genuinely is a typo. So basically, if you can get these people to a blacksmith, they get a huge boost and they become very good early game killers. You are also in this early tier supported by an AOR unit, Area of Recruitment, the Enedwaith Woodsman. Now, they're only available in Enedwaith and areas around, like Bregost, but they're pretty good for their early tier stats in stopping cavalry from getting to your line. They can do a Schiltrum, as most untrained spear-type units can. They are skilled against mounts, and their weapon is actually more of a halberd than a spear. So their low attack stat is not as low as you might think, and they can actually do all right. They can certainly hold back enemy cavalry, and they'll be your go-to anti-cav unit in the early game, because they are, in fact, your only anti-cav unit in the early game, discounting your javelins. And speaking of javelins, of course, the reason I bang on so much about javelins is that Enedwaith is the quintessential javelin nation, basically. They can do things with their javelins, at least once you get up to the end game. They can do things that other nations only dream of doing, and they're just really good javelin nation. We built the whole nation basically around the idea that they are sneaky javelin throwers, and that's what they are. So your militia tier Greyflood Raiders will make a big part of your army. Now, if you actually get into battle with these people, they're rubbish. 2 attack and a 5 defense, they're not going to do anything. But with a 7 missile attack and more javelins than, or to give Enedwaith a breakdown, any unit that is an Enedwaith javelin unit has these bonuses are the other javelin units. They have double the amount of missiles that most other javelin units have in most cases. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2 missiles more. But remember, that's per man, so that's 6 volleys from the whole battalion. If half of the battalion die before they get to throw a single javelin, then they will throw 12 volleys because they collect the missiles from the dead, which is quite a nice feature that some people might not know. Their range is more than any other javelin unit, and their accuracy is higher at each tier than other javelin troops. So a militia javelin troop from Enedwaith is more accurate, with more range, and with more missiles than a militia javelin unit in any other nation. So as you can imagine, the Guardians of Enedwaith are actually the game's best javelin units by a long margin. And you will, when you fight against nations like Linden and you think, oh god, how am I going to win this? And then you watch a volley of Guardians of Enedwaith javelins tear through Falas lords like they're made of paper, you'll suddenly realise how Enedwaith actually works. Never engaging anyone in melee and always running away and throwing large, sharp spears at them. Now again, they can hide anywhere, the Greyflood Raiders, which gives you another ambushing boost. But unfortunately, poor morale, average morale response. Most of Enedwaith get a terrain bonus fighting in forests and grassland and snow. You get a negative in deserts. So basically, you get a boost everywhere you are unless you are fighting in the snow. But that varies, as you can see, as I've now moved on to the Riders, who actually get a bonus only in grassland and they get a negative everywhere else. But that's because they're cavalry, and cavalry suffer a negative when fighting in forests. But Enedwaith, on the whole, get a bonus everywhere but snow, whereas some nations only get a bonus, say, in grassland, and then they're unaffected by forest, and then they get a negative in desert. Enedwaith actually get a boost in all types of ground except for desert, where they get a negative. I said snow, I meant desert. So we try and help Enedwaith out as much as we can with various ancillary boosts. But anyway, back to the raiders then, or the riders, sorry. They're, again, Javelin, but this time they are mounted Javelin. They get 9 missile attack rather than the 7 of their dismounted counterparts, reflecting the momentum that the horse gives to allow the Javelin to get a bit more oomph. And again, they are more missiles than other Jav-Cav. They have higher range and better accuracy than other Jav-Cav. They are very good Javelin units. And they're cheap. Did you notice the recruitment costs are very low? I mean, like the 210 for the Enedwaith Klansmen. I mean, the dwarves' starting recruitment costs are around 500-600. So numbers and secrecy and javelins are how you win as Enedwaith. But in this early tier, there is also an archer. They've got a new look since version 1.2, and they are the Hunter's Guildsmen. They aren't very good archers. 2, 2, 2, 2. They are only 1 stat in each stat better than Snaga. They're terrible, really. But again, they can hide anywhere, and they're cheap. And that gives you a boost. You are, unfortunately, very similar to an Orc nation, except you don't have that brutal savagery that Orcs have, and you don't have the weird, quirky units that Orcs call upon. So, Mordor obviously has great beasts and trolls, and Dol Guldur has the forces of Rune turned with, that have sided with Khamul, and they get, like, dedicated elites. Angmar are the same. They get very dedicated elites. They get snow trolls. And, of course, Isengard get trash in the early tier, and then incredible elites in the late tier. Whereas as Enedwaith, you don't really get that. You're trash from the start to the end. So it can be challenging. But then we come to the second tier. Again, these units are available before the barracks event. This gap here marks the barracks event. Again, highlighting that Enedwaith are a very early game faction. Your boosts come in the early game when your militia's tier at least isn't that outclassed. But in the late game, if you haven't started killing people off, you'll really start to struggle. But in this second tier, let's start with the River Swordsmen. River Swordsmen are your first dedicated units, and they have passable stats. In comparison, their attack of 5, charge of 5, and defense of 9 is about equivalent to Gondor Militia, and this is your second tier unit. That's how outclassed you are. So it can be a struggle, which is what I'm really trying to hammer home. They are okay though with 9-5. They're pretty good. They're the first unit you can actually rely on. Their morale is still only average though, and your units will often break. But there is a spear counterpart, and they have awesome shields. One of my favourite shields, in fact, one of my favourite units, are the River Spearmen. They're just solid spearmen. A 12 defense, which is nice. A really high shield stat, which is good. It makes arrows very ineffective against them. They can form a shield wall as well, rather than a schiltrum, which gives you a nice boost against cavalry, and helps because, of course, the Erenvorn Woodsmen are still... They're good against cavalry, but they're still garbage. So it's all relative. The River Spearmen still not breaking the bank either, so you're getting reasonable stats at cheaper. So whilst they're equivalent to Gondor Militia, they're cheaper than Gondor Militia, so you can still mass numbers. But the real unit that's going to start actually winning the game for you, and the unit you should always beeline for because they are so powerful, are the Angren Raiders. The reason these are so powerful is because their Javelin is effective against armour, they are skilled against mounts, and what... A feature that it doesn't show you, unfortunately. For example, if I went to Guardians of Enedwaith, does it show you? No. So the Greyflood Raiders are just normal Javelin troops. Their Javelin hits a single person. It's not armor piercing, doesn't do anything else. The Angren Raiders have an armor piercing Javelin, and they have an area of effect Javelin attack. Which just, it's a hidden bonus, and I'm just explaining you how it works in raw form, in that basically their javelins will hit more than one unit. They won't body pierce, that's saved for the Guardians of Enedwaith, but the javelin's impact area is larger, so their damage is on the whole buffed. Again, they have a good range, a high accuracy, and they only get 5 missiles though, because we are getting up the tier now, and they can be a little OP otherwise. But they are beasts. They're absolute beasts. And when they're finished with their missile attack, they are at least passable swordmen as well. So they're not just going to cower to the enemy and run away like the Greyflood will. So a very good unit. Supplemented as well by the dedicated units continue with the River Archers. River Archers, although these gentlemen look like they're very haunted expressions, don't they? They're just passable archers, really. Nothing at all amazing about them. They are just archers, and they're better than your earlier tier archers. They have better morale response. Their range isn't very good. Their accuracy is pretty poor. It was average, only 24 missiles. And when they get engaged in melee, they're slightly better than your militia. They're not as good as your mainstream. But you also get the last cavalry unit that you will actually get are the Outriders. They should really be called River Outriders, I suppose, because they share the same look and theme. The River units are your dedicated units, and the Outriders form part of that contingency. Their attack is 4, total defense is 7, their charge bonus is 5, which is good, so they can at least do what you'd want a cavalry unit to do and flank and hit the enemy. They also, in a nice little twist, get a bonus against other cavalry, which helps you no end against, of course, Rohan, if you do decide to go against them. So the Outriders are better than average early game cavalry, but they're still really not that great. And a nation like Rohan and Khand, even Dol Amroth, are going to really outclass you. So you have to be careful. But then the barracks event kicks in and you start to get some units that might actually do something. And we will start off with the River Elders, because they are your dedicated elites. And again, they are available to hide everywhere, or they are able to hide everywhere, sorry. A 9 attack, which is pretty good. A 14 total defense, and they get a bonus against mounts because they are, of course, spearmen. They're just very good, or they're good spearmen. They're not very good. Remember, these are your elite units, and they're only slightly better than Gondor militia. So you really will struggle. But their recruitment cost, again, is quite low. So you're not going to break the bank getting armies of them, and they will do their job. Now, they are supported by the Moot Pikemen. Your Moot Pikemen are really good. This is one of Enedwaith's best units. Of course, that's the section we're in, but these really are one of your best. They're actually really good pike units, and they are one of the only units you need to fear if you're attacking Enedwaith. Their attack is 4, their charge is 5, defense of 13, but remember they're pikes, which means they get the OP pike animation, and it makes them very effective against everything that comes at them. Their morale, though, is still pretty low for an elite unit, and so they're not going to survive for a long time if they get flanked. We also then come to the Moot Keepers. These are your most common later game unit, I would suggest. They're just dependable axemen, really. They are, of course, their attack is 9 again, and their charge is 4, defense is 15. But other than that, they don't really have anything outstanding. Average morale response, but at least they have, or average morale, but at least they have impetuous morale response. So they deal with morale shocks better than most other units in your army. So the main theme that you're seeing with Enedwaith at the moment is their morale is pretty low. But then you also have the Foresters of Halluf. Now these people are actually really good. These are a very good archer unit. A missile attack of 5, range 220, 32 missiles, very high accuracy. They're one of the few ranger units that doesn't have ranger in the name. So they are actually on par with the Ithilien Rangers, Dunedain Rangers, the Athala Rangers of Dorwinion and Dale. They're good. Rangers are always very good archers. They're not particularly grand when the enemy arrives at them, with only 11 defense and a 6 attack. But if you can keep them out of the enemy's range, they will do the job very nicely. They're a really dependable arch unit, and one of the few units in Enedwaith's roster that isn't outclassed by other units of its same tier. Comparatively. Of course, the elves and dwarves will outclass you, but in terms of other human units, they actually hold their own against other units of the same tier that are the same type. But again, do note that their morale is only average and their morale response is only good when we're at the elite tier. But worry not, for the women of Enedwaith come forth for you, and they are the War Chanters. War Chanters are one of the few units that have the ability to shout to the heavens to inspire your troops. So not only do they inspire troops that they stand next to, they also can chant to raise the morale of your entire army. That is its purpose. The AI always uses it. They default to using it. I don't know if chanting only works if units are in a radius of this unit. I'm not sure. I think the game can't really do that. And I'm fairly certain that chanting affects your whole army regardless of where these people are. But I could be wrong. But do just note that chanting makes your units survive a bit longer, or fight a bit longer. Now these people also frighten the enemy units, and they have a very high attack of 10, which is quite nice for a two-handed sword unit. And their defense is 16, so they're actually pretty good melee troops. But their low number means they can be quite easily stun-locked and killed off. And they also sound like women. Rally together. Which is nice, because they are. They are the women of Enedwaith, and they come onto the battle to encourage the men by shouting at the heavens. And nothing more, you dirty-minded people. And then we come, of course, to the unit I've been banging on about like there is no tomorrow, because they are really one of the best units. They are the best unit Enedwaith can train, and they are the Guardians. They are, as I've already mentioned, body-piercing Javelin units. That means the Javelin will go through more than one man. They can slay elite armoured units really easily. Really easily. They're so effective. Their missile attack is 10, their defense is 18, and when they're finished with their missiles, they are dependable spear units, I should also say. Very dependable spear units. Their melee attack is 7, charge bonus of 8. Very aggressive spear units as well. They frighten nearby enemy infantry, which is useful, and this is the real clincher of why they're good against nations like Linden. They're effective against armour with their javelins. They also, as I say, get a 70-metre range, which is better than any other javelin unit, and their accuracy is the highest of any javelin unit. And they get 5 missiles as opposed to the normal 3 that most other nations have. Their morale is very good, but not locked. But their morale response is impetuous. And they get a bonus against mounts and beasts. That should really replace all of that with just beasts, really, shouldn't we? I was also going to say that, yes, they require the unification of Enedwaith. So you can't train them until you've got all of the regions listed in the description of the Great Clan Hall. And last of the dedicated Enedwaith units are your Bodyguard. Your Bodyguard are archers. And there they are, Elder Guildsmen. They're just slightly better than the Foresters of Halluf. They can hide anywhere as well, which will affect all of the generals. If you have more than one general in an army, anyone who isn't the actual leader of said army can hide anywhere, which is nice. They have excellent stamina, which a lot of the Enedwaith units do actually have, something that they can fight on physically, even though if emotionally they may have already broken. Their morale is good, and their morale response is good, which is not very good for a Bodyguard unit. Reflecting, again, that Enedwaith really are all about numbers and sneaky tactics. You are not going to beat anybody if you just go man for man, line for line, and try and take them down. The only nation you can hope to do that on are people like the Misty Mountains, Dunland, early game Bree, and that's about it. I mean, even the Anduin have some really impressive early game units that will give you a run for your money. So, no, you're not going to outclass anyone, and you have to rely on the fact that most of your units are hide anywhere. Certainly the units that you'll get frequently. And, of course, your Javelin troops are the finest Javelins in the whole of the game. So that's Enedwaith's dedicated roster, but then I wanted to take this opportunity to show off 2 mercenary units that are most commonly trained by Enedwaith, and they are the Druidine and the Saraline mercenaries. Now, the Saraline mercenaries, I believe, are actually trainable by Enedwaith in Siduri. Or is it called Siduri? Yeah, I believe so. Saraline, basically. The province next to Londare. But the Druidine are only available as mercenaries. Hunters. And the Saraline mercenaries are also available through the mercenary pool, but I'm fairly certain Enedwaith can actually train them. So you will see Saraline mercs a bit more often than you will the Druidine. We'll start with the Saraline because they're really good for their unit type. They, again, are a halberd-style unit, so they're effective against armour with the OP halberd animation. Not as OP as pikes, but still very powerful. They get a boost against mounts for their luck, for their sins, sorry. And they're adept at hiding in woods, so they can't hide anywhere, but they can at least hide better in woods than other nations can. And what that basically means is that if a unit can hide in woods, it might require a forest like that big on the map, for example. If it's adept at hiding in woods, it will require a forest that's about that big, which means you can hide more units closer together than you can if they all share that trait. And then, of course, hide anywhere can hide anywhere. Ronsil does exactly what it says on the tin. Now they require... Oh, it is called Siduri. I thought it was. They require Siduri if you are to train them, and you can get them as mercenaries, I think, in a few of the surrounding regions as well. So they're not totally restricted to it. But they are just kind of a beefier version of the Armory Vaughan Woodsman. And they help you out immensely. And then we come to the Druidine. Hunters. 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 They're Druidine hunters. They can hide anywhere. They are skilled against mounts. They are reliable in woods, which means they fight better in forests. They have excellent stamina. Their defense is only 4. Their melee attack is only 3. And their missile attack is only 4. But, he says with great relish, they do poison damage, as listed by the top arrow line there, which means that their arrows reduce the morale of anybody they shoot, which makes it very easy to break the enemy morale. And it works very effectively in game. One volley of these so if you're fighting against a nation that doesn't have a general in the army, so you're fighting against an army and there's no general, one full volley of Druidine hunters can take a kind of early tier unit from ready for battle to almost broken. So it makes it very easy to kind of snipe certain units and make them rout. But as you saw, once they actually get into battle, they're really not very good. And they cannot take being fired back upon. They have no defense to enemy archers. So you've really got to be careful with them. But they look really cool, and they have a unique look because they're taken from the America's DLC of Medieval 2. And they basically are actually just Native Americans. Made a little bit to look a little bit more Middle-earthy. I should also note that when they finish with their arrows, they are a dedicated pike unit. So their low melee attack is actually kind of a lie because they are very dependable pike units. Alright, so now we get to play the fun game of who are we up against. I know people said you shouldn't show off the colour scheme if you want people to not know who you're going to be up against, but I can't turn that off. So you're going to always have to see that, I'm afraid. That's the one I'm after. We want to give everything to the AI and go for it. So get rid of those. Oh, F6, will you just bugger off? There we go, we're gone. Alright, I may have just given it away accidentally, but let's have a little fun, shall we? Who do you think our enemy nation is? Again, if you want to play the game, just comment on the video, and obviously you'll find out in a few seconds, but just give you a little bit of time just to have a quick look through who you think we might be fighting in, you think I might be showing off in the next episode. There's quite a few hints there with the army composition, I think. Oh, look at those guys. Bloody going for it. The Druidine hunters are off on a right bender. Go on, lads. In case you didn't guess it, it is, of course, the Variags of Khand, and there they come. Galloping through. You get to see the Druidine hunters because I wasn't actually certain if they were pikemen. It wouldn't be a Gala-Durthan video if I didn't say something wrong. But let's see, they're going to swap to their melee weapons now. Yes, they are pike units. I thought they were. They're getting absolutely massacred by these Variag lancers, though. The hordes of Khand have come. Red and black banners flying atop the back of every man. The thundering sound of their silver-clad horses shattering the Elder Guildsmen and Druidine hunters before they can even do anything. Back in the main line, all you can see is red. Red, the ground and the terrain is covered in it. As basically the Mongols arrive. Variag bowmen standing next to Khandish hunters. Firing off all of their weapons there. There's the Variag nobles. One of the few units that retain the looks from the original DaC team. Actually, almost all of the units have been redone by Hummingbird, and they look so good. Warlords, Cataphract archers. There's Ushisha Storm Riders coming into the front there and picking enemies off with their outrageous crossbow attacks. And there's Warlord's main Cataphract thumping into the enemy hard there. Until you can get the Brotherhood of the Lance, though, then you can see true elite power. But remember, Khand are not an elite cavalry faction. They are a bit like Rohan. They are an all-around cavalry faction. Dol Amroth are the elite cavalry faction. Khand just get a bloody lot of cavalry. Some Variag swordmen charging into our Moot Keepers there. The Variags are possibly the most changed faction in Divide and Conquer from its inception, since the point I joined 6 years ago, or however long ago it was. 5 years ago, I think, sorry. Since the point I joined, Khand have changed so much. Oh, and with the death of our general, I think we can call it a day. And that is Enedwaith. I personally love Enedwaith. I think they're really fun. The kind of us versus them mentality. The fact that you are totally outclassed. You're the absolute underdog. Even orc factions laugh you off when you get to the late stages of the game. You are one of the worst in terms of military prowess. But you're plucky and you're resourceful. And it's fun to play as them. And I enjoy them a lot. So anyway, that will conclude the episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying version 2.1. Do note that version 2.1 cannot be downloaded on Total War Center. And if you are struggling with installation and you need guidance, you have to go to Discord or ModDB. You cannot use Total War Center any longer for any discussion of installation or download. And I don't know how long, I don't know. Total War Center, I think, will slowly lose favour with us. So if you haven't joined the Discord, I do suggest you do. You don't have to speak. I think a lot of people get misconceptions of Discord because it is primarily a voice chat service. Do note it has a very fleshed out and workable text chat service as well. So if you're afraid of speaking, you simply don't have to speak. You can just chat in one of the channels, which are a bit like forums or fora. And so you don't have to chat if you don't want to. But I do urge you to head there because we will slowly be leaving Total War Center, I think, as time goes on. But for now, that'll be all. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have, as we have been utterly annihilated by Captain Arguthan of the Candish enemy and invaders. Captain Alpine. Anywho, for now, Navar na den Pedamad Melonin, and farewell.